Hey, what's up, everybody? What's up? Welcome back to another episode of the Weekly Flow. This is the first one we're going to try to actually find our flow and get into the proper groove here. I've got Colleen Brady in the background here. We're going to bring her in just a second, and we've got some of the other folks hanging backstage too. But we'll get to all that here briefly. I want to talk a little bit about what we're going to talk about today. We're all kind of on the forefront of the internet here and building the things that kind of are the place where people go to experience the internet or to get online or to sell their products. And a lot of us are investing personally into these spaces. We're building and putting our creative output into these digital properties, into these tools, into these platforms. And the internet from the beginning was kind of this promise that was made to us that, hey, we're going to create an economy of abundance and we're all going to be connected. And it's going to be this magical place where everyone can kind of build their own piece of it. And it was such an exciting promise and proposition that was made to us. And since its inception and that promise was made to where we are today, it's like, what went wrong, right? Like where did we deviate from what the internet was supposed to be? And I think somewhat we're getting closer to what the internet could be here in this Webflow space, in this creator space, in this no-code visual developer space, where we're kind of getting back into that. Let's build beautiful things. Let's try something really interesting here. Let's do something that nobody's ever seen before. And so I want to talk about the value of that and building that real estate, why it's more important for you to invest into building your URL rather than building, let's say, Facebook's presence or your Twitter presence or any of this stuff that you might do before building your personal brand. And so hello to Jail. I see Zach's in the house. Eastwood Studio, what's up? John Saxton. Got Aiva in the background. Chris Kellett in the background here too with Colleen. We're going to go through some of this. Let's just run through let's go through this vibe right here. Okay, show format real quick. Oh, gotta go to the smaller one. There we go. So we're gonna cover some housekeeping. We're gonna talk a little bit about what we're up to. We're gonna talk a couple of action items for you in the audience. Then we're gonna introduce the topic, which we already kind of did. And I wanna read a little excerpt. So every week we're gonna kind of bring something to the table, whether that's an excerpt from something we've read, actually this comes from something Colleen shared with me recently. And so, hey, Colleen, do you wanna take a second and say hi as we're going through the format and kind of explaining the new ditty here?
No, we're into the flow, so keep going. I think that's great.
There you're back. You're not muted anymore. Sorry, I had you muted.
Hello for the second time around.
I have a secret mute button that nobody knows about on the other side. So I just turn off the whole background.
That just has my name on it, right?
That's right. All right, so you can say hi now, Colleen.
Hello, thanks everyone for coming. So looking forward to today's discussion.
Nice. Okay, so you see a phone number there. You can literally call that. That's my cell phone number. It's a Google Voice number that is plugged in that you can call as we get going. We will ignore those for a while, but as we get into the open discussion, we will allow folks to jump in there as well. There's going to be a presentation typically. Today it's Colleen, but there could be up to 4 or 5 guests total on the show. So whatever the topic is, we're going to try to find some people to dissect and discuss it. And then we'll get into, again, the community conversation, because in the background, we've got hello squad, hello friends, hello friends. So we've got some things going on in the background there. Okay, so housekeeping, short prompt presentation. Okay, community discussion. That's pretty much it. Let's go into the next slide. Okay, so community planning efforts are underway. Colleen, we had a meeting yesterday. We're planning like what's going on. We're prepping for the global open house, and we're going to build this community roadmap, right? So a public community roadmap. We want to get the folks who are watching involved in what's going on. It's funny, folks saying, got an email telling me that they were banned. Yeah, we'll get to that. So the community roadmap, Colleen, what's going on? We got 3 public meetings that we're going to host on the way to the open house.
Right.
What is the open house? What can people expect at these meetings real quick?
Yes, certainly. So the Global Open House, this is going to be in 2023, this is going to be the 3rd time that we have done that, which is we're bringing folks from all over the world to get together, meet one another, network. It's also a chance for, if somebody has a group, a chance for them to kind of help connect with people who might be interested in their group that may not necessarily have known about that group. Last year, one of the highlights of the event was we did as you can see on screen, we had an intro from Vlad, but we also did a group selfie, which was really amazing on a world map where everyone had their little avatar from Gather and kind of showed that. So it was just an informal time to get together and connect. And so here it is, kind of winding down the end of this year, and we're starting to prep a little bit for this new coming year. And we always do things a little bit bigger than what we've done before. And as part of our interest in community, part of that is instead of the small group of us that's been getting together and talking and thinking about kind of the things that we'd like to see in the space, we're introducing now this concept of having some public meetings. And this came out of a discussion that we had yesterday that Zach, who's in the background, he was part of that. A few folks who were in the audience, like Maggie and Penny, and I may be missing others, were also part of that discussion. And it was one of the things that we decided to do is instead of just always talking about things in small groups, is to start to open that up so that there's more voices.
Yeah.
And so that we all get out of our own little bubbles too, because it can be very easy geographically, time zone, to be just seeing things in a very, just basically what's in our own bubble and be missing opportunities, problems, things that are going on elsewhere that maybe need to get highlighted or not just problems, but opportunities.
Yep. So as we move forward, we're just basically going to open up the planning process. This has kind of been like a, small group process. We're going to open this up to other folks as we kind of open up the rest of this. So the goal is to kind of open up a public roadmap for what's happening with State of Flow, with all the community efforts that we're putting forward, moving on. And these streams will kind of continue to build momentum as we move into that. And I think, actually, I was thinking about this yesterday, Colleen, is we should continue to maybe even just have a once a month public planning meeting, and maybe just invite the community. So we'll have 3 of those on the way to the Global Open House. We will reveal kind of our public roadmap at the open house, along with a number of other things that we're working on. So if you'd like to get involved, Colleen's going to share a link in the YouTube description about how you can get involved in that stuff. The Global Open House is a really cool event. As you saw, hundreds and hundreds of people come from all over the world and hang out with us in Gather. To just talk about Webflow and building and doing different things and all sorts of different workshops and stuff like that. So, okay, on to the next thing. Click the link in the video description if you want to get involved. I think Colleen has shared that in the comments as well. Okay, so now we're going to get into the topic at hand. I see a lot of you here saying, what is it? Where is that? Oh, I have to go out to this view if I want to see the comments. Okay, let's pull the comments on, who was it? Steve Stanbury saying, oh, I shrank the wrong one. I shrank the graphics or the comments, not the graphics here. There we go. Got an email telling me I'm banned. This is what we're going to talk about. This is a trending, excuse me. This is a trending topic on the internet right now. Why you want to own where you publish online. We're seeing people talk all the time about, like our State of Flow Twitter account is banned. Right, the State of Flow Twitter account is no longer available to us. We hope that changes with some of the stuff that's coming at Twitter, but there's no guarantee that that'll happen. And what happens if one day you went to log into Webflow and you couldn't log in? Or what happens if you go to Twitter or Instagram or like YouTube and you just can't log in anymore? And so like this is a real serious question here as digital creators and people who are putting all this energy into building things on the web. And so I wanted to read this article. You've been banned. This is where the headline came from. You all got the email. Steve Stanbury got an email. He says here, saying that he was banned. You're not banned, but that's the title. That's what we're talking about. What's up, everybody who's joining us? You haven't been banned. You have not been banned, but that is the discussion point. So I'm going to open this up. I'm going to read this. This is from Van Schneider. The link is in the YouTube description. This is a members only article, but I'm going to read it to y'all here. I hope he doesn't cancel us. Okay, the internet was the single most important part of my early teenage years. I know it sounds a bit dramatic, but I'm serious when I say this. I've always valued freedom. From a young age, the endless constraint of real life felt like a burden to me. So many rules, restrictions, authority, legacy, everything felt like it was pushing down on me and nothing made sense. While much of it still doesn't, I was also a teenager transitioning into adulthood at the time. So I don't know how many of you guys can relate to this. Just like the internet was an outlet. It was like this cool place where you could go and kind of explore things. It was like this huge promise, right? The internet came along, no rules, no authority, a fresh new canvas in a new world seemingly made just for me. I was immediately hooked. I could be myself, explore, experiment, and build without all the red tape and naysayers in the way. Then it all changed. The internet grew up. The internet grew up and has slowly become the opposite of what made me fall in love with it in the beginning. The freedom and feeling of ownership from those early days is disappearing. Our new boss is the algorithm. We are governed by the platforms, its rules, and authority. Today, you can build an audience over many years on Facebook or Twitter. It can be gone within a second. You can lose your account in an instant because of some arbitrary violation of terms. I've experienced it myself and have seen it with many friends. Accounts banned at the whim of a bot, and good luck contacting a massive corporation to get it back. This is just exactly what happened with the State of Flow account. There's literally no recourse. There's no place for us to even go. We filed an appeal and it just ends up in a dead end. The audience you're building on other platforms is never truly yours. And we've seen this. I'm not going to read all of this through here. Where does it go? Perhaps you spent building an audience on Instagram, blah, blah, blah. That's what we talked about, right? And there's another layer here too that we've just seen is even if you can maybe get past the other ones, maybe you can be limited at the app level, right? Like Google and Apple now have the potential to just stop you at the point of contact. And so email lists seems like they're a safe haven, but perhaps the last place where you can own your audience, and by owning it, I mean you're more or less guaranteed, like some of you saw an email that we sent today, but some of those go to spam, even though you signed up for email from us, or Google, again, puts it in your promotions folder, or something happens that you just, do not see the email, right? So even email is not guaranteed, right? So the best guarantee when building an audience is using tools you can control. Enter Webflow, enter websites. But that brings an interesting question, because do you own and control Webflow? So this is where the conversation is going to come in. And building a brand product people love, one they won't forget if it suddenly disappears from their feed, one they will seek out on their own. So you kind of want to own that end destination. You want to own the place people come to hang out, to learn about you, to read your stuff, to interact with your content. Because in this new world, something you loved or enjoyed might be gone from today or tomorrow, either gone for good or just out of sight, unless you make an effort, click the right icon, move the email to your inbox, give it a tag, or manually navigate to a profile on social media. You won't see it again. Today, we have to actively seek out what we care. Otherwise, it will be determined for us. That is becoming more and more clear every day, I think. So initial thoughts. Colleen, as we read this, you're the one that found this article. You shared this. I know you probably shared it because it's something I talk about often. So, what are your thoughts as we read this and as we open up the conversation here?
Well, part of it was just the timing of that, your State of Flow account having been banned, and we don't necessarily know why. It was a fairly new account. And at that time, I was also seeing other accounts that were getting banned that I would not have expected. So for example, there's a newsletter tool that is on iOS that I use that also had gotten banned. And they're kind of in a similar boat of, they've developed a business and aren't quite really sure what to do and are not necessarily getting recourse. So as much as a lot of times we think that, hey, maybe there is, somebody's got something going on, either a bot or whatever, that deserves to not necessarily exist, individuals kind of get caught, businesses can get caught, and your potential livelihood is on the line. So yeah, it just kind of struck a chord. And if anyone is interested in that article, the person who wrote it, I also think is just a very, very interesting person in general. There's a couple of different businesses that he does, one of which is he's a theme developer, I believe for WordPress, Simplest Themes. And then he also has a tool called My Mind that part of that promises that you own the data. So you can save your content and always have access to it.
Yeah. So if you're watching right now and you'd like to join the conversation, you can jump in. There's a video link in the description if you'd like to jump in, and you can join us on video, or you can call in, like we said, and you'd like to share your thoughts on this topic. We're trying to go old school DJ, radio DJ vibes here, and see if we just get some random conversations sparked about interesting topics. So anybody in the background right now, I see Chris raised his hand here. So Chris, what are you thoughts here as we talk about this stuff?
Yeah, funnily enough, I don't use much social media. I don't use Twitter or anything. I rely on in-product updates. So with Webflow, I when I get the new update, that pops up and so on. So I don't seem to be that affected. I can see it being a problem. But with Webflow, one of the big things with that is, what if you've got a site in there and for some reason you got banned or so on? What would happen to the data there? Should there be an agreement with companies like Webflow where if they can't arbitrarily ban you, they have to notify you and then give you a certain amount of time, and also have to always give you access to content that you've put in there already, so that you can guarantee you can always get it back out? Because obviously from a design point of view, when you design a logo or brand, it's yours until the client pays for it, and even then, there's a ownership issue and so on. It's in there in the terms and conditions if you read it, but maybe there should be a contract with all of these companies, especially smaller one, or not small. Webflow's not small, but as they grow, where they agree to always allow you access to content you've put into their system, even if you can't add any extra because you've been banned, but you can at least.
This is why it gets interesting to me to see like like tools like WellSync, because you could store your data in Airtable or have external data, and then you could just prop it up into Webflow or maybe port it into any other platform that might accept structured data. That's the hard part too of something like WordPress versus Webflow, where in a WordPress you might have access to your data, but maybe it's not as structured as it is in Webflow in a modern format. Whereas with Webflow you might have maybe modern data structures, but it's is it as portable here? We've got, let's see, Steve just jumped in the game here. Steve, what are your thoughts here as we talk about owning where you publish?
Yeah, I've just been kind of dipping into Web3 for the last 2 years, mostly because the decentralized nature of it and being free. And I think there's a lot of people behind the scene manipulating conversations, and there's no so much freedom of speech or freedom of the assets that you upload and stuff. So I've just been seeing that there's some blockchains. I think there's a project called Blockhost, and it allows you to kind of upload massive files, lots of data straight up to a blockchain. That means web applications, websites, data, images, memes, whatever you want. And I'm just kind of think that Web3 is definitely here to stay, and I really think that it offers us an opportunity to kind of own our information, right? And I think with projects like Permission, that basically will pay us in cryptocurrency if we want to share our personal information, instead of just joining and having that personal information given out, right? So I'm definitely a big advocate for Web3. So hopefully.
Yeah, I think Web3 will be an interesting channel here, just in the whole mix. I mean, I gotta imagine people are thinking about this at every level, and this is where, again, I asked Vlad about this. My initial conversation with Vlad was on Twitter as a response to some of his texts, and I asked him recently at the Webflow conf, what their position would be on some of this, because Webflow is not as big as Twitter or Facebook or any of these things right now, but who says at some point they may not be? Who says at one point Webflow's not sitting in front of Congress because they shut down some major media company, or because just whatever. I don't know. There's a million things that could happen between now and the next 3 years as Webflow grows and scales and becomes what I think is going to be the front end for a lot of things on the internet, right? Imagine just putting this stuff on, and then you hear things like, AWS maybe shuts down your whole server, or Google keeps you off of the App Store or something like that. And you think oh, well, is there any real safe haven anywhere in the tech world? I don't know. That's the thing that becomes interesting to me. What level of protection could there be for some of those root level, internet restrictions? So I don't know. This becomes one of those. And then the other thing is how much of that is really relevant to you as a creator. How much of this day to day is actually something that affects you as a, somebody who's building websites for an agency or for small businesses, or for whatever it is. So I don't know, where this actually plays out, or what people, might pull away from this. Let's see, Dale Jensen, let's take this comment real quick. Oh, why does it do this? Comments
just to keep you on your to keep you on your toes.
The comments just freeze every so often. I have no idea why they just decide to be rude like that. So I'll try to pull this back in real quick. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, feel free to pipe in here.
Yeah, this is, as you can tell, a live show. Kinks to work through from time to time. Do you want to read it if you're not able to pull it up, or do you want me to read it?
Yeah, just cover for me for a second while I actually try to fix this. I don't know what that means. Say something interesting, would you? Okay.
No,
there
but I
we
think,
go.
okay, there we go.
Ah! Okay. Okay. Just fairly recently, I've become more active on Twitter. This is Dale Jensen, community, and it said now there's Twitter's weirdness. I don't know what that means. Like people are so worried about Twitter like falling apart, and yet it seems to be thriving. I don't know if this is politically fueled. I don't know if people are just panicking. If we're just like love to be outraged about like the craziest thing. I know people are worried about like information, misinformation, disinformation, like all these different things. I also get really worried about letting tech people decide what misinformation is, right? Like we should all hide kind of behind the umbrella of free speech, like but the law, right? Like, is it against the law? Nope. Okay, well, it should probably be, be mostly legal. Now I get then there's moral decisions to be made about like, do you want pornography on your platform? Do you want violence on your platform? Do you want, like what is that violence? Do you want street fights or, is words violence? And so you get into all these like really deep conversations when you start trying to make some of these decisions that I don't know that most of us are qualified to make. And I don't envy having to make any of these decisions, at any of these platforms at scale. Let's go into the presentation here because I had some other thoughts. I want to go back to the outline here. Because there's tons of places you can publish online, right? You can publish on social. These are things like Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, etc. You can publish on single purpose platforms, things like Patreon, Substack, OnlyFans, Medium.com, etc. They kind of like do one thing really well. You can publish in private community apps, so things like Slack, Circle, Discord, whatever your app of choice, Mighty Networks, whatever it is. Then there's like direct email, which we talked about, like you can own. This is something you probably want to do. You probably want to own your emails at some level, just as a base level. Like every social network, everything you sign up for starts and ends with an email. You like the day you sign up and the day you unsubscribe and delete your account or whatever it is. So although you can't get through, the email is still like a top-notch one. But the self-hosted website is kind of that next level tier in that group. And the self-hosted website is the thing like WordPress, Webflow, Wix, Squarespace. And each of these kind of presents their own limitations as to whether or not you own the content. I know some of these, like Squarespace, won't let you export data to some of the other platforms. I don't know if they've gotten better at that than they had in the past, but I know that that's like, data portability is a big issue. WordPress is the only one of these options up here that's open source. People often make the argument of open source versus closed source. We've done discussions about that in the past, and maybe we should do them again on this channel. Just to kind of like bring that up because open source is only relevant if you can read and understand and manipulate the source, right? Otherwise, open source doesn't matter. If you don't know how to stand up a server, if you don't know how to do maintenance, if you don't know how to do some of this stuff, it doesn't matter. It could be as open as you want, but if you can't read it or interact with the code, it's irrelevant. And so open source means out of reach for most people in general from a technical standpoint, which is what leads to platforms like Wix and Squarespace and Webflow, which is why we're all here. But then that creates a whole different, offering of questions and problems and things to think about. So there's just a little graph just kind of showing, that website's the only one that allows completely unique designs and full contributor management. I mean, a website is the thing. If you want to own where you publish online, a website is the way, right? Like none of these other platforms, every one of these other platforms like a Patreon, a Substack, like all these other things are just trying to be what a website is. They're just trying to remove the technical complexity of building a website because that shit's hard. Right? We all know building a performant website, a high quality, accessible website is not easy, especially when you have to do it every single time a different way. That's why we all like to start from templates. That's why we all like starter kits. That's why, like Reloom is so popular. That's why like these things become popular in the space. Yeah, maybe you want to start from scratch, but even the from scratch developers typically have a base layer project that they start from with all of their little things, and then they kind of scale up from there. And so, there's just some limitations as you go through, but the reason you want to own, we're going to run through, there's like four or five reasons that I have here, and then we'll open back up for some conversation. So the biggest reason you want to own is controlling the point of conversion, right? Like it's very hard to monetize your Facebook page because Facebook has monetized you. You're the thing they're monetizing. So like that platform's incentives are not in line for you to monetize your content there. Same thing with YouTube or whatever. Like most people who make money on YouTube do not make money through ad revenue. Like a very small number of people on YouTube make money through ad revenue. Most of the people who are popular on YouTube make money through brand deals and ambassador deals and promotions and different things like that, right? They sell their services as consultants, or they're using that attention to do something else. And so you kind of want to own the place where people give you the money online. You don't want that going through as many, very many layers if you can avoid it. Secondly, there's the SEO benefits. So Aiva, maybe you'll have some thoughts on this, but you're building a long-term annuity, right? I think that's the next thing. Like you're building long-term annuity. The SEO, the web presence, the brand around it. Like my personal website still generates traffic from articles I wrote years and years and years ago. And so this is the value of building something online and owning it. It's that you control whether that URL exists or not, whether it stays up. In theory, obviously the servers can go down. Obviously, like, you know, there's different things that we could talk about that might impact that capacity. But, you know, let's, I see your question. Let me get through these 4 reasons and we're going to come right back to you. Okay, it becomes censorship resistant, right? So it's more difficult if you control the URL. Maybe if the data does go down, you could stand it up with another platform. So you could plug in another data set or something like that. So there's, you know, there's just things to consider here for why it's powerful. So let's just go through that. Aiva, I see your hand raised. I imagine you got to have something on the SEO stuff here. What are you thinking? Oh, hang on. You know what? I think I might have you muted. There you go.
Yeah, so that's also a magic there, because just because you own your website doesn't mean you own your website traffic. It's still, Google is still, in terms of SEO, works like a social media. If they decide after, let's say, algorithm update to kind of shut you down, turn off the faucet, they turn off the faucet. And then you don't get organic traffic. So SEO is this way much harder, way much stable game, but in the end, you still have the same risks. And that has to be kind of understood before you launch a website, because how does that traffic come to you? You know, if it's paid traffic, then it cannot have certain types of content on it. If it's organic traffic, then you cannot violate certain rules, just like social media. Sounds the same, right? You violate certain rules and then bam, it's go to zero. So we're still in a kind of same spot. The only thing is it's a little bit more trustworthy, but it's like the difference between email and social here is the same. You know, websites and social, you still get that risk. There's always that risk that after the next update, you're going to get bulldozed and that's it. And then you have to start from scratch. And usually that means even a new domain and stuff like that. So,
yeah, it's interesting to me that Google has evolved to be so much like a social network in that regard, where like Google My Business essentially just became their social network, and you can even publish like business hours in real time. And I mean, it's super valuable as a business owner, but Aiva, what you just brought up there is that like even the traffic's not yours because most of the people are coming through Google. What happens when Google changes their algorithm, right? What happens, and I know a lot of people see this in the SEO world where, you know, they're doing white hat, black hat, whatever kind of hacky things you are, because it's always the battle of, you know, the SEOs versus the search engine itself, trying to figure out like, you know, who can get you the best information, and the SEOs are all like, how can we get the most information to point back at us? And so there's like this big battle. So yeah, like those algorithms change all the time and people get affected. And I think the best bet again is to own where you publish, but also to seek out a specific audience. You know, like the more you try to game the system, like I think the algorithms are optimizing for quality content as best they can. And so the better you can get at SEO and building stuff that people like to see that also delivers value, the better Google's going to be at kind of getting back at you. Ivy, you got a follow up here? Oh.
Yeah, that I completely agree. If you actually provide value, you get more like you have more defenses against things like that, and scammy ways are always, you know, gonna be punished eventually. And here I agree. Like that's what makes it more sustainable than most social media, because if you actually work on complete value, on complete audience, you know, pleasure and information and everything, then usually you're very safe. But as on social, more rarely, can still happen. But if you provide value and people know, they're going to follow you anyways, because, you know, if you're the best source of certain type of information, even if you get punished organically, people will be still coming in because you're the best source for a certain type of information. So always aim for quality. And I think this is the best bet we can make in today's this kind of attention economy that we're living in, you know.
Yeah, let's see here. Jokan is saying a couple things here. Let me go to the comments. We need a pre-build survival backup plan on computer, cloud, and on Notion's page. Okay. As an example, for YouTube, I have my video on Odyssey as well, growing platforms. Okay, so that's interesting. As an example for YouTube, I have my video on Odyssey as well. Okay, so they're saying kind of like distributing the content. This makes a lot of sense, right? Having it in lots of places, right? That's another way to become censorship resistant, or to kind of own, not necessarily own it, but maybe have a distributed place where you got lots of, you're on all the different platforms. The problem with that is then managing it all, keeping up with the audience, building it, right? It's kind of hard to have your attention focused across a bunch of different things. Colleen, any thoughts here?
Yeah, I guess I think you're right about in terms of it can be hard to maintain those things. There can be the advantage of you never know where your audience is going to necessarily be. You may think that your audience is on YouTube, but we're talking a little bit about how algorithms change, and so YouTube had been supporting a certain type of content length, and now maybe your strength is long form, and now they're wanting short form or such. So, in terms of just kind of having a digital moat, there's advantages, but also advantages in terms of the business. I guess this does have me thinking a little bit more and more of, you had that slide about being censorship resistant, and I can kind of see that on some of the technical pieces, but being censorship resistant also, you can have campaigns and such where there's, I'm just thinking about like Yelp reviews. Yelp has gotten into hot water at times where they're kind of strong arming businesses to advertise, and if you don't advertise, your business may not come up as well, or there may be more negative reviews and you can't necessarily counter those negative reviews. So just because you can potentially move your data around doesn't necessarily mean that you're resistant to things. And I also keep wondering now, I mean, we're fascinated. We've been talking a little bit in recent weeks about AI, that as AI gets more and more sophisticated, things coming out, someone may think that somebody said something, did something when they didn't. And so now we're countering them or canceling or doing something when there's actually bad actors somewhere else that is really the problem.
Yeah.
So I think we kind of need to look at what we're doing individually too, and how we respond to things.
Yeah, I agree. Eva, you're getting a little love on the background there, but Colleen, those are good points. I wonder if Chris, you got any thoughts? Our resident AI expert hanging in the background here.
Yeah, we had a comment the other day on Twitter about the way there was a comment about Google looking at spammy content that was auto-generated. And we addressed that with auto-generated and AI content are very different, because you can't distinguish AI content from written because it's well written. But I mean, we've got a tool that creates testimonials that you wouldn't know that person, because we don't know these people who are giving testimonials. You could use that and generate bad reviews if you wanted. How would you know the difference? But that thought of producing good content, delight, and so on, the phrase of goodwill's out. I think that's one of the best ways to combat any of this bad stuff, because you can't stop it. You're not going to stop it. It doesn't matter what survival kit we put together, whatever we put in place. There's always going to be some way in which we haven't got ourselves covered. Like if you've got your stuff all over the place, then maintaining it, and so you drop the ball over here, and then that would be an absolute nightmare, especially for a small business. But maintaining your reputation and having a good reputation that's willed out by your customers and your proof and so on. And I think in the past, if I've received any bad press, it was a case of just keep doing my job, keep doing it well, and that bad press will disappear over time. And solutions do come along. So you can think you're really robust, and then something comes out of left field and slams you that you didn't see coming. So flexibility and being agile is probably one of your best defenses, so that you can shift. And also having, if you've got with reviews on products, you got 5-star reviews, and we always want to go and read the 1-star or the 2-star just to make sure. And we may believe the 1-star or 2-star. It may sound believable, but in the main, I think people have know whether you're good or not, and they can see from your product. So having good products, having good services, having a good reputation built up, I think may allay any of that negative stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting too. I'm going to get to Zach here in just 1 second. You're up next. Like the conversation had kind of always been, if you don't like what's happening over here, then go start your own thing. You know, like that was kind of the common social media play, especially in the political spectrums or different, you know, it's like, hey, you know, this is our platform. We can decide what we want to have over here. And if you want to say something else or do other stuff, like go over there, build your own thing. And then as Steve Stanbury here points out, then AWS, or when AWS started kicking off websites for political reasons, people got the industry thinking about where they store their websites. And so this, you know, became another just thing to think about here, is not just, like Aiva said, it's not just about getting the search traffic. It's like, hey, what if Google shuts you down? Well, what if AWS shuts you down and you just can't get into the game? So, Zach, what are your thoughts here as we're having this discussion?
So it's obviously important to own where you publish online, but it's also important to recognize the benefits that you get from these platforms and the infrastructure that they've already built. And, you know, the safest route is to always consider even your favorite platforms that you think are fine now, no problems with it. You know, what happens if something turns with them? What's your backup? You know, diversify is probably the safest route. But at the same time, like if you're trying to build your own platform and start everything from scratch, it's kind of like if you open a store out in the middle of nowhere with no access roads and no electricity, like you're going to have to spend some time building that audience and that infrastructure. Maybe that's not what you're all about. Maybe you have a lot less risk being on these major platforms where there's already an audience. It's like renting a place in the middle of a city versus being way out in the middle of nowhere. So, you know, to defend the big platforms and things, they spend a ton of time and money on cultivating an audience and having people there to pick up on your message.
I think that's a great point, actually. And I think there's a balance there. I talk all the time about, like, and you said like renting from somebody, because that's kind of what it is, right? Like you could open your storefront, like you said, Zach, out in the cut somewhere where maybe there's not a lot of traffic, or maybe you want to rent a storefront on Main Street that's like in the middle of the city. And you still kind of have to have reasons for, once people get in the door, for them to stay there. But there's a lot more people are going to see your door and be able to walk in that door. So I get that point. The question then happens, like, what happens when they sell the building and they demolish your store, and now you can't afford to move next door, or it's going to take you a year to get, you know, set up across the street, or whatever it is, you know? And that's the real question, is not that, like, and even going back to what Chris was saying, like trying to be resistant, is like, what is that momentum worth, that inertial momentum worth, and when is it worth spending that? Is it worth spending it after you've already built the momentum and, you know, somebody comes and takes your knees out? Or is it worth at the beginning going through some of that resistance to kind of get, you know, things moving forward in, like maybe Chris was saying, in a variety of settings? So like maybe that's what it is, right? You have to have both. It's like you start building your thing here and you use all these other platforms as best you can. But that's one thing we should all keep in mind, is that the goal for all those platforms is to get people back to the thing you own, you know, not to like literally the whole purpose of all those other things should be to point people back to your thing, not for you to just build on their thing, wholly owning that, you know, that at some point, you know, you don't know where to go with that.
Yeah, and it can make a difference too, whether your product or service is under a time constraint, you know, something that's just a current trend that may not last, and, you know, something that's needs to happen quick versus something that you can invest more of a long-term, you know, plan around.
Steve says Adobe, bingo, bango, right? Or what's like a Flash or any of this stuff, right? Like Flash was super important and now it's not, you know? So like, okay, let's go. Aiva, I think, had something to chime in here.
Yeah, so both what they said is kind of, first AI part is, Yeah, they're building AI to catch AI, and that's the new meta we're in. Like the AI algorithms are being learning how to catch it. So this is something we have to be skeptical, but no AI will catch other AI if it's valuable. Because you can only catch spam if it's a lot of it and it's bad, right? So that's something. And then for the storefront and nowhere, I think Etsy is a good example. You know, try selling this much on your own Webflow website where you sell something. Try, you know, you will never. But rent that from Etsy, play by their rules, slowly migrate some of that, those customers to your website, buy better things. And all these platforms, what I kind of wanted to say on that diversify part, all these platforms know that you will be doing that and know that you wanted to be doing that. So for example, in my experience, I know how Etsy just forces you to not to take emails from them of customers that bought from you. There are tools that allow you to do that, but you're kind of breaking the rules. And, so we're always playing this game. I think that storefront example was best. The game was always there. Somebody buys the building, demolishes it, bam, you're done. You're on the street. You're a business that was worth 5 million, now is worth nothing. So we're now just playing this game in front of our computers from our bedrooms. And now we're, a little bit like frustrated that, oh, I built this thing and now they can take it from me. But that's always been there, survival of the fittest. And using, again, back to Etsy example, using something like this can make you a big business real fast. But it's the reality, right? That we're
the biggest
in.
problem
I think
for me
we shouldn't.
It's not always about like what happens when Google just swallows your feature set. That's the other thing. It's like it's not even that like the platform might censor you or what. Like think about Clubhouse, right? Clubhouse was the biggest thing that happened for audio communication in the last 18 months, let's say, and then every app just basically swallowed that feature and just built it into their platform, and now Clubhouse is like. Like maybe there's people on Clubhouse still, but I don't see them because now I'm on Twitter with Spaces, or I'm, trying to build YouTube Spaces here with kind of stuff like this. So, like there's all sorts of different things. We got, what's up, Josh? I see Josh just called in the background here. So we got Chris. I wanted to get back to you. You had your hand up here. What are your thoughts here? Anything new to add to the conversation? You want to shift gears?
Yeah, no, I mean, just on that point, I've been there with, we were running a business with Adobe. I was saying to you before that I was working with Adobe. We had a business that generated between two of us about, 1.6 million in 2 years. Adobe gave us 2 weeks notice to say they were pulling the plug on the product. And we lost the entire business in 2 weeks. Fortunately, like somebody else who had mentioned about having a survival kit, we kind of felt it may be on the cards. And so we were prepared for it, and we jumped into Webflow, and Webflow saved our bacon on that point because we were ready for it. But that was a really good point that was made, that to think about the fact that all of these might go away. So going into it, eyes open, that it's really great now, but it could change. It's almost like having an exit strategy for a startup. It feels wrong to go into something expecting to leave, but everything moves so fast. So just be prepared. Another one was another Adobe product was something called Goodberry that became Business Catalyst. That had thousands and thousands of websites on it. And Adobe gave everybody 6 months to shift huge businesses from one place to another. Yeah. So Adobe being mentioned, but yeah, just be aware that you could get shut down. So just have a backup plan.
Yeah. It's that's so hard to think about though, because like it takes so much to actually be like to build like if you want to build something on YouTube, you got to go hard, and you got to kind of commit to it. So it's hard to like go and be like, I'm going to be a top YouTuber and a top Rumbler and a top Odysseyer and a top, whatever. It's like, even like just doing YouTube and then trying to make enough video to then try to cut a clip into shorts and publish regularly and keep things flowing. Like, it's so much work. Just to keep one platform happy. And now they're all on this like daily cycle where they just want churn on content. It used to be like you could publish something for a day And then people tomorrow might see that same thing. Now you're lucky if people a couple hours from now are seeing the thing you just posted. So it's like, I don't know. How do you get over? Josh, any thoughts on that? I'll bring you in hot and heavy here.
I just joined the conversation. I
That's
don't know
right.
what the
You got to get
topic
thrown
is,
right
but
into the fire, man. You can't,
I mean,
you can't
but
come in here with
based
this
on what-
backdrop and not like just drop the wisdom. Look at this.
Based on what what I'm hearing, it sounds like, yeah, just again, owning your own platform, right? And like, how do you manage that? I think my take is, yeah, there's going to be more and more growth and saturation in this space. And I think the next trend is just a niche, like even for us, like just niche down on YouTube. That's the one platform. I don't want to like go on. We're even thinking of live streaming like LinkedIn or Twitch or like Facebook. And then you got to like manage all the other stuff. But then I almost feel like as an experience for like a viewer, it's like, oh, I see you on YouTube and I also see you on Facebook, and then it's like all the same and the post is recycled. So it like kind of like cheapens it. Whereas if you're just dedicated on like one special space, it kind of, I almost feel like, yeah, the future is more like creating little tribes type of thing, like unique little communities, and then just stick with your like, 1,000 fans or whatever. So yeah, I don't know. That's my take, but everything's evolving so fast, so it's hard.
Yeah,
to
the 1,000
hard to know.
fans is a good analogy, but having a home for those 1,000 fans is kind of like the core here. And I think picking that platform is what, like, you got to do right from the get-go, right? You don't want to, and I don't know what picking right means, right? I think picking right in this context means start with a central hub, the place you own. I don't know if that's a URL, a website, whatever, and then start adding spokes around that as you go. Like step one, get a place that you can point people to, that whether it's a custom name, a custom URL, whether it's your brand name, whatever it is, like that's the place that you should put at the center of whatever hub it is that you're trying to build digitally. Once you have that hub, then you start pulling the spokes out. And the social network is just the spokes on this big network wheel that you're building, And so start with one spoke and two spoke and three spokes. And the more spokes you add, the more stable this wheel is going to become. And reinforce those as you go. And like Josh was saying, sometimes the best content for YouTube is not the best content for Twitter, is not the best content for Instagram, is not the best content for, whatever platform you're going for. And the hard part is repurposing all that content or taking the time to whittle that down. As content creators, that can be the hardest part, is first of all, recording something that's interesting and then turning that into like the usable chunks that you might want to distribute across the other platforms. And that's kind of what we're experimenting with right now. Right, this weekly flow is a long form version of let's hang out and see what happens and play around. But then maybe some of this needs to get chunked up, or maybe some of this needs to be recorded in shorter format, or I don't know. But there is something to be said about having these long format hangouts where people can kind of jump in, jump out, join the conversation. We see the thing happening on Twitter Spaces. It's great, gaining a lot of popularity, just people at Clubhouse just kind of getting together. But where's the visual context in that? Like, who knows where this conversation could devolve into, and could we like just then have some visual context that might help the conversation, or is it too much? I don't know, right? This is all experiment. So I think that's the other thing too, is like once you have your hub and you're building your wheel, just play, like don't get too locked in that like you have to be viral every moment or every post you make has to be a winner. Like you can delete it tomorrow, delete it in an hour. I do this all the time on Twitter. I retweet the shit out of lots of stuff. And then like the next day I delete it. Just do that. First of all, it'll help you, like, people will appreciate you. They'll start retweeting your stuff, and you just go back and curate your feed. So I don't know. Any thoughts on that? I'll shut up for a little bit and see if the gallery here wants to chime in.
I think if nobody else has raised their hand, one of the things that they talk about with content is that hub and spoke. And so, I hadn't really thought so much, I guess I think about the content hub and spoke concept for SEO and those types of things, but I never really thought about it in terms of social. So that's kind of an interesting concept to me. One of the things that I keep seeing with some of the algorithms is that you need to be creating content that is specifically for that algorithm, because they want you to keep people on the platform. And so rewarding for creating content specific, because they don't want you linking out. And so I don't know that I've seen anyone who's really cracked that nut. I don't know if anybody else has. So I guess there's kind of potentially a push and pull of how do you kind of feed that algorithm and not entirely be a slave to the algorithm, that's out there and get folks on your where you want them to go.
And also knowing how to play each algorithm's game a little bit is important. For instance, on LinkedIn and almost any platform, you don't really want to link out, right? Any social platform, you don't want to link away from the platform. That's why you'll see people, for instance, like I'll share a video and I won't put the link to YouTube in the actual post. I'll put it in the comment, in the first comment. Post an image, the same thing, right? It's because they deprioritize links that take people off their platform because their algorithm's incentive is to keep people on the platform. And so anytime a link takes them away from the platform, they're like, oh, let's deprioritize that a little bit. And so that becomes a game that you play, whether it's Google, whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's Twitter, whether it's Facebook, like they all have their own little tweaks. And when you dive into the industry, there's always someone exploring and writing about this and sharing their knowledge. Aiva, I see you got your hand raised. What are you thinking here?
So this, what Zach said about, don't put all of your eggs in one basket, but also make more than just eggs, reminded me, I had the same burn when I was just young, still studying. We had a 20 people team that we let down and let go because of algorithm change. Because back then it was golden days of Facebook and it was so easy and we were selling so much product and it was moving so fast, that's like the thing that me and my wife with running multiple small businesses learn is like build more than one, as you were trying to say here, like work on more than just one, because that's something that kind of allows you to become this, not only a cook, but also a chef and a lot of other things. And you also learn a lot of other stuff from, as Colleen saying, how not to be the slave to algorithm. Because if you want to write for Medium, there's rules for that. If you want to write for Twitter, there's rules for that. LinkedIn. And like that is the hardest thing, because after a year or 6 months or whatever of doing the same thing over and over again, you become expert of it, but you don't know a lot about other stuff, So I think this is what we're leading to, this popped out.
I can't have Aiva up here and not like pull up his meme game.
Meme king.
So
Yes.
Let's do this. And we got somebody else just join the call here. Who did I just see? Aaron, what's up? Aaron's in the mix here. Okay, so Aiva, we're going to look through some of this. Pre-talk about Webflow components. Nice. New Webflow components are draw 25. Nice. If you missed it before the call, we had some conversations about Webflow components, which we can dive into. We're at the point where it's just a free-for-all now, so like whatever happens, happens. So we're just going to review some of your memes here. They deleted my Twitter account. Maybe you should have started a website. Nice. Users, social media. Why would they? You go dark sometimes. I like it though. So if you're hanging out with us, go follow Search Historian. He's always live memeing the talks here. Anybody else have thoughts about the topic at hand here? Anything else they want to share? We did have some. Go ahead.
No, yeah, I just want to clarify what. Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I think my audio kind of crapped out here. Are we talking about like protecting your own content and creating your own, website to manage all that, or just like playing the algorithm game, or
just
like
kind
trying
of
to get access and stuff?
Just bouncing around everywhere, right? The initial premise was building your own presence and kind of owning and managing that presence, but then that there's limitations that come with that. There's things beyond your control. Each platform has their own things. Even when you think you protect against one thing, maybe the next layer, has like, they pull the rug on you. And so it's like, there's like layers to the internet, right? There's like somebody showed me these the other day. It's like 0 layer, 2 layer, 3 layer, 4 layer, 5 layer, 6 layer, whatever. Like most of the internet we interact with is on like layer 6 or 7 of this like ring network, and like each layer in has the ability to like shut you down. And most social networks are still on the outside layer. As you get in it, then you get into like Amazon Web Services, you get into like the caching providers, you get into some of these other like technical giants like the Googles and even the Intel, right? Intel has like a Intel management engine on your computer that becomes this thing that they can like basically backdoor into any machine. And so at what level can you protect, right? So that the whole conversation has just kind of been this ethereal talk about, back and forth. What's the right way? What's the wrong way? What do we need to worry about? What don't you need to worry about? Are you safe with Webflow? Are you not? Like that kind of thing.
Right. Got it. Because I think it all depends on what your purpose is. What message do you have? who's your audience and who do you want to speak to. If your audience is just to like blast out and get as many people as possible, then like, yeah, using like all the big platforms like YouTube, LinkedIn or whatnot is good. But then if you just want, again, like I said, like a niche market, then like I almost feel like you can pull that off managing content on your own website and then just kind of going for organic traffic. But again, I'm not a pro in like social media strategy and things like that. So
Yeah.
but I always feel like, you know, cater to who would naturally want to listen to you and don't try to like cater to the world. You know what I mean? So
Yeah. Go ahead, Colleen.
I mean, there's some of that, but you know, I'm just kind of finding it interesting watching everything that's going on Twitter right now. I mean, I think, you know, a number of us are fairly active on Twitter, and you know, there's changes that are going on at the company. I've certainly noticed or at least I feel like over the past year, starting in January, I was having conversations with other folks in no code about like, are you noticing changes in what you're getting served via Twitter? And there have been distinct moments over this basically year where I just feel like there's something that's changed, and it's, you know, how do you necessarily learn to keep playing that game, engaging, continuing to stay with your niche or getting your message out, or not just getting your message out, but getting the messages in that you wish to receive or that interest you. So I don't know. I mean, I think, you know, some of this has been ethereal, but I think some of this really does have, you know, day-to-day implications.
Yeah, and that's why I wonder. It's like how do you determine where the crossover is and how much you need to be paying attention to this? Because I know for a long time people were writing off like kind of some of the stuff that we're seeing now. They're like, oh, that's just college kids being kids, and that's just this being this, and then next thing you know, 5 years down the road, it's like, nope, it's something else. And so is this like you know, is this the tip of the spear? Is this the whole spear? Like, I don't imagine this conversation is going to get less complicated the more platforms we get, the more people are publishing, the more things there are online to figure out like, hey, is it what he said or she said or what they said? Is this true? Is it fully true? But that's where I think, you know, going back to like you hide behind the principles of the law. Free speech is a very important principle as it relates to just humanity and society in general. It is the foundation for freedom, right? The ability to criticize people publicly, the ability to criticize your like government and people in power, like that is a fundamental right. We're watching this in China right now. If you're not paying attention to what's happening in China right now, shit is going crazy over there. Okay, with this extreme COVID lockdown policy stuff, and you're starting to see protests and riots and different things, and this stuff's going to trickle over into lots of different places. And we cannot forget thousands and thousands of years of political history and philosophy that led to the First Amendment being number one. There's a reason it's number one. There's a reason the Second Amendment is you can protect that with violence and physical force and arms, right? Like those two things being at the top of the list are not an accident. And we dismiss those things at our peril as a society, right? Like for whatever reason, misinformation, disinformation, whatever, that's just like who decides? Right? Like you cannot pick what disinformation is. The best thing to do is to let all the idiots say as much dumb things as they can publicly so we can all know them for their stupidity. The last thing you want to do is hide the people who are saying stupid shit and let the people who like the stupid shit go find them secretly. Because then they build like cockroaches, they build armies in the dark. And you don't want that. You don't want armies in the dark. You want the lights on, right? Like it's okay to have a snake in the room as long as the lights are on and you can see that's the snake right there, right? So let the people say their dumb shit, right? Like the implications of silencing a president of the United States, like you don't like what? That's not something you would ever have thought would happen even just a few years ago, right? I was just traveling a couple years ago. And me and my girlfriend at the time were having a discussion about whether it was safe to fly to Chicago the day after the election in America. The fuck are you talking about? This is not a game, right? I know we're just here and this is like a community thing, but this is real serious stuff that, like Colleen said, has implications that will ripple through everything we do for the next few years. And it's important for us as people who are building this to kind of think and discuss and dissect and understand some of it as best we can.
And there's only so much that we can.
Mic drop.
Well,
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say there's only so much we can understand because, you know, algorithms and such are, you know, a lot of that is closed source, you know, protected at a company level, trade secret, this, that, and the other. And who knows how well I'm sure it's so complicated. How well do people even who are working on some of this potentially know? We keep
Yeah.
seeing some of the things with algorithms of AI of, hey, we're having issues with misinterpreting such and such. Well, what was the data set? Well, the data set didn't necessarily didn't necessarily take that into account. So, bad input, you're going to have flaws in the output. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
I see. Aiva, you got a thought here?
Yeah, so your mic drop kind of reminded me of olden days when I grew up in a post-Soviet country, so I was born first generation there, and my grandparents and parents grew up in the Soviet world. So things you were talking about are really realistic, and those stories that you hear from families when you realize that people live like that is just insane. It's just nobody wants that. There's a difference between being socialistically, active and say, hey, maybe homeless people should have a place to stay, and saying, as you said, let the stupid people say whatever they want to say. It's better that way than small circles of very dark corners of the world that we don't know about, and they can be doing, a lot of stuff. So I think that's like very, very resonated that part, right?
Yeah, it's always interesting to me to listen to immigrants and people who are coming to this country that have come from real oppression and real tyranny, and then listen to people who grew up, in the suburbs, who, somebody saying something mean to them is oppression. And it's like, yo, you don't know what oppression or struggle or some of this stuff really is. And that's another thing. It's like there's this idea that, your comfort, your emotion, your need to not be offended should somehow supersede society's ability to like dissect an idea at scale. Like one of those things is not like the other, right? Like our ability to talk about a big topic at scale and have tough conversations about what's happening is not the same as like, I'm a little offended. Well, just mute it or move on or change a channel or whatever it is, right? And so I think it comes back to a little bit of just individual resilience and understanding that, some of this stuff has historical context that we've seen play out time and time again. And it's almost never the people who have your best interests at heart who are stopping other people from talking. It's almost never that. Just FYI, like it's very rarely, the good people who are trying to tell you what you can and cannot say.
Okay, so I mean, if we're talking about kind of free speech and things like that, I think even in, we're in the creative industry. I think that's really, really important because at the end of the day, let's say you got a round table and you're brainstorming stuff, right? You want to hear all different opinions, perspectives, ideas, because at the end of the day, the best idea will rise up to the top. And so you have to be willing to, even when you're having an argument, you need healthy dialogue. You need to hear what someone's representing on one spectrum compared to the other, just to compare, because like I think to understand that we all have at some point a fixed perspective, and I see this cup and I'm looking like at the handle, whereas if you're looking over here you don't see a handle. And so it's like to even acknowledge that we all see things differently and respect it, and then see the full picture when we come together. That's where true innovation and great ideas and great products and things arise. But if you stop that and you don't allow people to speak and share their perspective, then ultimately, yeah, you don't have a space to have great ideas and things to arise. So
I agree with that 100%. Yeah. However, I will say this: some ideas are better than others, and just because you just had an idea doesn't mean somebody 1,000 years ago didn't have that same idea. Right. And so a lot of times there's ignorance in this, where some young, eager beaver went to college, studied and wrote a paper and did a thing, but never really been out in the real world, has this idea about how the world's supposed to work. And they're like, I'm going to solve everything because why do we need money? We could just do this, or we could just make electricity do this thing, or we could like get, it's like, okay, that's a great idea, but go explore it. But before you go explore it, find out if anybody's done that shit before, right? If somebody's had that idea before, because some ideas are better than others, right? Like freedom of speech is a really good idea. That's why after thousands and thousands and thousands of years of political theory, it became, the linchpin for, a democratic republic that kind of blew up in a way that no other society before it had. Right. And so like there's lots of other things that leads into a different discussion. But I agree with you, Josh, that you do need to have an open avenue for people to explore and digest these ideas. But we also need to understand that some ideas are better than others. And we can't be scared to like just reject certain ideas
Yeah,
that have been
100%.
tested and that have been explored. And that's where it gets difficult. It's like, who then becomes that arbiter? That goes back to what's disinformation or misinformation. It's like, is the tech company that? Are you that? Is it our responsibility as individuals to figure out how to buffer that? Or is it Twitter's responsibility to say, hey, this is wrong, you can't say this, right? Like, whose responsibility, whose shoulders does that lie on?
Right. Well, I think then that's how you would define the structure of governance and decision making, right?
Yeah.
And that's man, we're getting super
It's deep.
super meta. But
this is
but
these conversations
like,
have to be had. This is what's happening in crypto.
How do you structure? Yeah, exactly, and that's great. How do you structure companies? How do you structure org charts, and like who makes the decision? Like, I remember, I don't know if they still do it, but early on, like Google, when they're innovating, they had a rule like in meetings that they had to make sure everyone in the room had a voice and to speak up instead of the loudest. The squeak wheel gets the grease, right? So creating a format of discussion to allow for everyone to speak, I think that's good. But then that may not be as efficient, right? So just figuring out that like that cadence, that structure of conversation. So here's a little plug. That's why.
Yeah, that's a really good point though, because I do agree that in a meeting, sometimes the Trump in the room is going to be loud and boisterous, and maybe the mild, meek person sitting across from them is not going to have something to say. So I do agree that there needs to be mechanisms to allow both of those people to speak and express an idea. So the loudest person shouldn't just be able to dominate the conversation. I'm going to go to Chris here has a thought. What are you thinking, Chris?
So on that subject, then. Should the companies that set themselves up, so let's say, you remember when Twitter first started and it was just to share group chats by SMS?
It was basically SMS, right? It was basically texting, but did like online.
So that's how it started out, and then it gets bigger and bigger. So should those guys have the right, though, now, because they came up with the idea, they did it, should they have the right to say what goes on their own tool? I mean, because if let's say with Webflow, I was reading through Webflow's terms, and it was very interesting. They don't take any ownership or anything of your content or whatever, but they do expect you to abide by their terms. So you build on their site, and so I mean, how would we feel if we built a platform and it allowed for groups and all sorts of things, their own little tribes and that, and then they come along and it's something that we fundamentally disagree with? Would we be wrong then to say, well, actually, I fundamentally don't agree with that, so I'm not going to allow it on my platform? So just because it's out in the public and the public can use it, why should they not be able to switch things off that they don't agree with?
Yeah,
because if we say that they can't shut me down because I should have freedom of speech, but then I'm not speaking about freedom of speech. I'm just saying, should a platform be allowed to switch things off that they, as a platform, don't agree with? And is that breaking their freedom of choice?
That's it. This is where it gets difficult. It needs to be structured, and this goes back to what Josh was saying. There are laws. Okay, so the rule of law is a very important thing. Outside of just freedom of speech, the rule of law is maybe more fundamental than freedom of speech, because the rule of law is what enshrines the ability to have freedom of speech and for people to respect that, right? So the problem with these entities is that there's no rule of law. It's just kind of the whim. This is what we're seeing with Twitter, right? Like Elon Musk is just like, hey, I like it, I don't like it, or whatever I want, and so the thing about a democratic republic or a country, let's say, or governance at that scale is that you can theoretically vote on who you want to represent you. They write laws. You can vote based on those laws. Maybe you can vote yes or no on specific laws, whatever it is. And so there's some mechanism for having recourse. And then there's also a set of rules that like everyone kind of follows. And so you could be like, oh, hey, here's where I clearly messed up. In this Twitter world, in this digital world, in the space we're seeing now, there is no clear governance. And so there's no clear outline. There's no like set of rules where everyone can kind of say, oh, this is where I tripped up, or this is the law I broke, or this is the specific thing. It's just, oh, on some whim, maybe some moderator or some person who, leans one way or another is offended because of the thing that I saw. And so now that's why, and so it's like this black box of moderation. And that's where I think, Chris, and this is where maybe crypto comes in, where you have some clear governance ahead of what's happening rather than post. Like it's very hard to retroactively change your mind and be like, oh, I think that's offensive, and I take it down. It'd be better if those things were clearly stated up front and there was like some kind of consistency how those things were enforced all across the board. And then the network can be whatever it wants. I don't have a problem with biased journalism. I just want to know that the journalism is biased. I want you to be honest about the things you think, about the things you feel, right? Like, don't tell me you're presenting both sides of the argument when I can clearly see you're just running down one side of the aisle. And that's where I wish we would just, hey, it's okay to think a certain way, but you can't get mad if somebody else thinks a different way. Like, that's kind of the point, right? Like, that's the premise here. I'm going to go to Aiva. What's up?
Oh, yeah, guys, but also don't forget that we're first time ever in a bell curve and now on the down cycle of these giants starting to be first time losing interest. For example, Facebook, let's say, we can hypothetically theorize that if this whole meta thing doesn't go right, which is still not going, we will have first social network ever dismantled gradually or something, because they outgrew the world population and they cannot get more users, and this is like on a down spiral cycle, right? And I remember years ago reading some sci-fi about, you know, about a world where countries disappeared, boundaries of countries disappeared, therefore corporations became the new entities, and this is what we're probably entering, like these kind of networks that self-monitor themselves, that you work in the same network that you use, that you belong to, and that you get a chance to kind of vote in, like Raymmar says, right? What happens if you start voting inside companies as a user, which is Web 3.3, 3.5, 3. Whatever maybe will offer, and that's like where we're going. The problem is that modern law will probably, well, based on what questions Congress are asking, will not be able to be there in time, or if they will, there was going to be change. So I think this is like we're interesting place where the bell curve is shifting downwards, and we're seeing first giants. And we know from history what happens when, you know, monopolies have to be dismantled, and that's a lot of pain and suffering. But at the same time, we end up in a better place after that happens. So it's just for us to witness this history. It's kind of interesting, you know, to speculate.
Yeah, I think we're at one of the most transitional, pivotal moments of all of society. Like, we're about to discover whether freedom is actually, like, freedom's never been, like, liberty's never been an accident, right? People being free and having any semblance of like personal individual freedom has never been an accident. And so we're about to find out whether or not we can maintain some of that moving into a digital world, or whether we fall into like a tyrannical oppressive state digitally, right? And Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. People like talk about 1984 as if like that's the roadmap we're following, but I would actually make the argument that it's more Aldous Huxley, Brave New World, where we're willingly giving ourselves up to this like opulence and depth and whatever. You know, we're Zach, I just saw your comment. No, I called the state of state. So I mean, I could talk about this stuff for forever. We're well over an hour here. I don't necessarily want these to be like time capped, but I do have a hard out at 1:30. But so we can start jumping into closing thoughts. I see Chris has got his hand raised here. We'll give you the mic here for a second. What's up?
Yeah, social networks that have closed down, MySpace, you know, they have their day and then they go. It happens. The great thing is, though, for content creators like us, is because we're agile. I'm sure all of us that have been in the industry for a long time, we've switched from platform tool, whatever, and we're quite flexible enough to jump from one platform to another. So as important as it is, I believe from my personal point of view that the best I can be is flexible and easy to jump from one thing to another, open to new ideas, open to new platforms. And I think if you want to survive as a creator in this field, just be open to new ideas and trying new things. And if you feel like you need to jump ship, because forests burn and they grow back stronger, or sometimes forests burn and they don't. But if you're one of the little bears or rabbits that can escape the forest fire, you can go and find new pastures. So just be that guy.
Yeah, that's good. Good analogy. Zach, what's up? I'll give you the mic here.
Yeah, just to continue on that train of thought and to kind of build, I love that analogy of the hub with all your spokes, and the more spokes you have, the more stable of a wheel you have. And I think the right way to think about it too at that point is, you know, build another hub, have another, you know, another chain of spokes and build another wheel, because then, you know, you have a a bicycle, and then you add another wheel and you got a car, and it's just more stability. So, I think that's the way to think about things. Things can change fast, things that you didn't expect, and you just, to be prepared, just diversify and have as much, backups and places to be if one thing shuts down. Just keep yourself safe.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's that's the thing. And I think that's where this all boils down to. We'll wrap this up to owning, we'll bring this, we'll try to tie this back into like the original premise here, which is owning where you publish. Like, this is probably less of a problem for the folks watching this or the folks interested in this than it is for the general public, because the general public is more at the whims of whatever platform exists, whereas we're at the cutting edge of a time where we're going to be able to build whatever we want, now that will be dependent on lots of other platforms and their ability to kind of like support the growth and them kind of staying open. But I don't think the number of platforms is going to start shrinking anytime soon. I think if anything, it's going to start increasing. Like the amount of options we'll have for building the things that we own that allow us to do what we need to do are going to continue to increase. So I don't see those options being limited as we move forward. I really don't think, like, if you're out here as a digital creator and thinking about some of this stuff, don't be scared to jump in. Don't be scared to start publishing. And specifically, don't be scared to start exploring on different platforms. And stop thinking about using these platforms in the exact way that, they think you're supposed to use it, right? Like, YouTube is supposed to be only used one way, or Twitter's only supposed to be used one way. Like, start thinking about how you can use and leverage these tools in a way that, first of all, still fits with their terms of service so you don't get canceled. But second of all, that allows you to reach the maximum potential with whatever the tool offers you, right? Don't always just think about following the rules to the T, right? Like, life, especially in a digital world, is about tinkering. It's about exploring. It's about like just pushing the buttons. And here you are with a screen full of buttons. And if you push them the right way, your bank account will fill up with money, which is the goal for all of us. So get out there and start building some things. Any final thoughts from the crew here? Anybody want to close out with a final thought?
Let's have more of these conversations. Very juicy.
Yeah, I think this was the first time we actually caught our full stride here of what this thing could become. And I'm excited to do a lot more of this. Chris?
Yeah, just reflecting on the fact that we have the ability to do this, and just remembering to just appreciate what we have and the freedoms that we have, and as creators, that we're not necessarily all in 9-to-5 jobs. We get so many choices every day as creators to do pretty much what you want. That sometimes there's little restrictions, but let's be honest, life is pretty good being a Webflow designer.
That's such a good point. Thanks for a little reality check there. And just in general, I mean, we are on the cutting edge of a whole new, I think that was also in the email today, was not just the, you've been banned, but it was also, the pros and cons of being on the cutting edge of the next thing in publishing and the next online publishing, right? This space is a vast sea of openness. And the reason Webflow is so popular is because it empowers pure creativity through a digital tool. And I think that momentum will not be slowed down by a single platform. I think it will not be maintained by a single platform. I think that is like the truest intent of information in general, is just to be free and to rebel against constraints and limitations and like any kind of these arbitrarily induced, personal like restrictions of like, oh, this is offensive or whatever. Like, information just wants to be out there, right? And so I think we're going to keep seeing that this trend will continue. The more things people put up to slow it down, the more things people will build to jump around, go under, go around those things that people put up. And so I don't know, it's just going to be a lot of fun to see. If there's one thing I'm excited, Chris, I think it's going back to what you said. It's like, this is such a good time. There's a lot of bad things happening in the world right now, but the vibe in this space, the just in general, people building, making things, like, it's so intoxicating. I don't know. I don't know. I can't imagine being in another industry or not knowing about this. Like, I talk to my friends right now who don't know about what's going on here, and they're like bummed out about things. I'm like, I don't know. It's like the most exciting time ever. And they're like, oh, shit's falling apart. And I'm like, I don't know, man. So
perspective.
Yeah.
It's all perspective.
Right. Maybe it is all falling apart and we just haven't noticed yet. Anyway, any final thoughts? All right. Well, we'll leave it at that. I'm a little disappointed. Nobody phoned a friend. So maybe we need to. Maybe we'll drop that. I do keep thinking that this would be fun to broadcast to Twitter Spaces, and maybe instead of calling in, people can just pop in on Twitter Spaces. So maybe the next time we do this, we'll add that dimension instead of the phone call. We'll try a Twitter Spaces link and see if we can bring Twitter into this conversation, even just broadcast this out as a podcast into Twitter Live. So I don't know. I think that's the next experiment for me, is to open up the conversation to another channel. So to me, this gets more dynamic the more people we get. So anyway, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for hanging with us. I appreciate you all. And we're going to kill the live stream now. Bye.